Many times I have seen people tell about their near-death experiences. And although there was charm in these stories, being a priest, I did not believe in them. Often these stories seemed rehearsed to me. I believe that if these people saw something at the moment of their clinical death, it indicates that some deviations occurred in their brain. I had no doubts about the sincerity of these people. But I was convinced that they believed in what they wanted to believe. I would not change my opinion now if I had not found myself in the same situation, says Don Piper, who experienced clinical death at the age of 38. That day, Don Piper was returning from church. It was raining heavily outside. To shorten the way home, Don Piper decided to go another way. When he crossed the bridge over the river, his car was hit by a truck driven by an inexperienced driver. Don doesn't remember the collision. He only remembers a bright light. When he saw it, Don Piper immediately found himself in heaven. As I was told later, several drivers were injured in that accident, but none of them were in the condition I was in. I was examined by 4 ambulance workers, and they all concluded that I was dead. Since I no longer needed help, the doctors took care of other people. My body remained lying on the bridge, Don Piper shares. Don Piper says that when he died, he did not fly through a dark tunnel, as some people say. He saw a bridge, and then a bright light. It was some kind of unearthly light, it is impossible to describe. And in a moment, Don Piper found himself in a place that looked like heaven. Don Piper found himself at a gate from which a light was pouring, like a pearl in a shell. At that moment, he did not feel any needs and knew that he would no longer have any needs. Don Piper didn't think about the land or anyone he had left behind. As he stood at the gate, Don Piper saw familiar faces coming toward him. They were all the people he had known who had died. At that moment, their presence did not surprise Don Piper. It seemed completely natural to him. Each of these people somehow influenced Don Piper's life. Many of them were strangers on earth. But despite this, it seemed that they were friends and had known each other all their lives. The first ones I saw were my father and my grandfather, whom everyone called Joe. I was at my grandfather's house when he had a heart attack. Then, together with my parents, I went to the hospital where Joe was taken. We were waiting to hear what the doctor would say. After some time, the doctor came out and said, "I'm sorry, we did everything we could." Don Piper recalls the last day of his grandfather's life. One of those who met Piper at the gate was his childhood friend Mike Wood. Mike grew up in a religious family, and was a religious Christian himself. He had many friends. After graduating from school, he was given a scholarship to Louisiana State University. At the age of 19, he died in a car accident. At his funeral, Don Piper couldn't stop crying. He was trying to understand why God would take the life of a man who was so devoted to him. Among those who came to the gate, Don Piper saw Barry Wilson, with whom he had gone to school. Barry had drowned in a lake when he was still a schoolboy. Now, during this meeting, he looked like a man. As I took a step toward those who were meeting me, I felt an indescribable thrill. I knew that with each step more and more miracles awaited me. I looked through the gate and felt no anxiety. No one who met me said that it was time to go forward. However, we all began to move toward the gate at the same time, Don Piper recalls. At that moment, Don Piper heard music. As a child, he spent a lot of time in the village. Walking through the meadow and making his way through the tall grass, he often frightened the birds. They flew up, making a noise with their wings. It was the noise of wings that resembled the music that Don Piper heard as he headed toward the gate. It was the most beautiful and pleasant music he had ever heard. The music there is beyond anything we can imagine. It seemed to me that at the same time I heard thousands of different melodies. But these melodies were not chaos. I could distinguish each of them with my hearing. This music still sounds in me, although more than 30 years have passed since the accident, notes Don Piper. Don Piper saw colors that he had never seen before. According to him, on Earth we are given to see only a grain of that beauty, when, for example, we look at the sunset or at the crystal clear lake in the sun's rays. But even all this cannot compare with the beauty of another world. Don Piper stopped right at the gate. Now he could see what was happening behind them. Don Piper saw a city with paved streets. The houses and roads in this city looked golden. Don Piper stood at the gate amazed. He understood that if he went further, he would see something even more amazing. But when Piper was about to walk through the gate, they disappeared. Don Piper is convinced that he came back to the sound of that priest's prayer. He didn't come back because he wanted to come back. Hardly anyone would want to go back to the pain that Don Piper had to endure. He came back to say, life begins after death. I realized that there was a reason why I was left among the living on earth. Perhaps so that I could tell about my experience. If we know where we are going after death, shouldn't our life be much better, happier and more beautiful already? But it doesn't show in people. Often we act as if we have failed in something, as if we have been hurt and broken. For a long time I was bedridden, and no one knew if I would be able to walk again. One day I realized that if I overcome all the trials, it will help others in similar situations. Maybe this is another reason why I am still alive. Don Piper finished his story.